Hey, you got a minute? Or should I say, a few minutes? Because boy, have I got a story for you. This is a story, well, I'm going to tell you this story in just a minute. But let me ask you this question first. How many of you like the sun? You love the sun. You're a sunbather. You lay in the sun. You want tans. You go to the beach. You go camping. And the sun is really a cool thing if it's not too hot. Of course, if you're in Georgia and in Florida, and some of the other southern states, a little warm sometimes. But the sun gives us light. The sun warms us and keeps us healthy and good and from freezing, right? And so we're going to talk about the sun and the moon when they stood still. And that's next. I want to show you something. I want to show you the backside. I'm in my living room. Now, you can probably see those steins a little bit. I mean, they're probably not as light as I'd like, but I've got some other things in this place that, I love sitting in this room. It's my front room, and it's also where the closet is, and you can put your coats. But I've got some cool things in here. My office is right next door, and I go in there and do radio spots and all that kind of stuff, and I enjoy it. So this is actually one of my favorite parts of the house, and you can see I have a good view there. But let me ask you a question then. Since we're in this comfortable place, you get comfortable too. Now I want you to know something that throughout this story, you need to remember this. God's got this, okay? God's got this. Any situation we're in, God's got it. Now let me ask you a question. How many of you before have sat at work or worked, whatever you do at work, and you keep looking at the clock? How many of you have done that? Because you're thinking, pretty soon it's going to be time to go. And every time, and it seems like it's a while in between that you look at the clock from the first time to the second time. You look at it and you go, that thing hasn't moved. It looks like it's about the same time it was, it seems like an hour ago. Well, that's the kind of story we're going to tell today. Okay, now, hey, you see I changed my glasses here, so I'm going to do a little bit of reading, and I'm going to explain some things to you that happened. So a little bit of history before we get into the sun and the moon. Gibeon was one of the Canaanite nations. Gibeon really was afraid of the Israelite people and Joshua. They'd heard about how they defeated other nations, other Canaanites, other places. And so they really, really wanted to make sure that they weren't going to be hurt. So they devised a cunning plan. What they did was they really, actually, from where Joshua and his men were camped, they were only a few miles away. Now, because of that, they were so afraid when they heard they were near that they said, we're going to go make a pact with them. Now, so what they did was they were deceitful about it. They figured if they show how horrible they look and how they, what's going on, and that Joshua will feel sorry for them. So this is how it happened. They took and filled their knapsacks with moldy food. Let's see, they filled old sacks on their donkeys and wineskins, old, torn, and mended. Now, why'd they do that? Well, they wanted to have them to think that they were in desperate straits and they needed Joshua's help. And they would be a part of them and be their friends and help out each other if they made a covenant. So they went to Joshua. Joshua ended up making a covenant with them. They told him the story. They deceived him. And you got to understand, they weren't supposed to make a covenant with evil nations. The nations of the Canaanites. They were coming to take them and defeat them. They were coming to make the new promised land there. But the way that the Gibeonite ambassadors talked made it sound like, oh man, we need your help. We've heard of your fame and everything that you did in Egypt, and we so think that you're wonderful and we need you. So, and they said, look at our bread. It's moldy. Look at the wineskins. And so they made a peace treaty with the Gibeonites. Now, a few days later, in verse 16 of chapter 9, Joshua, it says that Joshua and the Israelites figured out what was going on. You know, when you deceive people, somebody's going to figure it out, right? They figured it out. And so what happened was, to get closer to what we need to talk about, they went to visit them. And Joshua said, I'm going to curse you for what you did. I can't kill you. I can't defeat you, but because of my relationship with God and this covenant that I made under him, but I'm going to curse you. And it says that in verse 24, they answered Joshua, because it was surely told your servants that the Lord your God commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy the land's inhabitants before you, so we feared you greatly. So they're trying to make the case still that, look, this is why we did this. And maybe they were right. Well, something happened. When you make a pact with the most famous, the best decorated, hard-fighting, victorious warriors like Israelites, guess what happens? Well, it says in chapter 10 that the king of several nations, the kings, I should say, of several nations, king of Jerusalem, king of Hebron, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon, saying, look, we see what's going on, and come and help us, and let us smite Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua. So all these nations began to come together against Gibeon. And so Gibeon obviously goes to Israelites and said, look, we need your help. So the Lord said to Joshua, oh man, we are bound now. We're bound by this peace treaty, this pact, that we have to go and help them. So what happened is, here's the cool thing. God told him, look, don't worry about it, Joshua. I've got this. God's got this, right? God's got this. I'm going to make sure that not one of them stands after the battle. They're going to take him out. And so there was a great slaughter. In fact, the Lord caused panic before Israel, a great slaughter at Gibeon, and chased them all along the way up to Beth Horon, and smote them as far as Azekah and Makkedah. Now, you probably can't tell how far this is, but that's probably a long trek. Okay? They didn't just chase them a few yards or a mile. They chased them quite a ways. And as they fled, the Lord cast stones from heaven on them, great stones. Could have been hailstones, probably. And if you've ever seen pictures of hailstones, sometimes them boogers are big, right? Well, that's what, and you know what it says? It said more died because of the hailstones than the Israelites slew with the sword. God's got this. Now, something else happened. Joshua spoke to the Lord on that day. And you got to understand, they're still fighting, okay? And there's still a lot of people to defeat, a lot of warriors to defeat. I mean, these are like 5 nations, right? The 5 kings of the Amorites, these kings that we just mentioned, and all their warriors. And so Joshua says to God, please help us. And so what happened was, he spoke to the Lord, and he, in the sight of Israel, Joshua says, sun, be silent, and stand still at Gibeon, and you, moon, in the valley of Ajalon. Now, I'm going to tell you something. This is a weird thing. How many of you, if you were in a battle, or you were fighting, or you were, especially for your life, you know, you're fighting for your life, and you hear the great commander say, sun, stand still, moon, don't move, what would you think? Now, they'd seen miracles. I mean, they'd seen all kinds of miracles God had done for them. So maybe some of them believed it, maybe some of them didn't. But the point is, here they are fighting, and they continue to fight, and they continue to fight. And they notice after a while that sun up in the sky literally is standing still. It isn't moving. And the moon refused to move. The moon refused to move. So they kept fighting, and so it gave them plenty of time in God's timing. God's got this, right? In God's timing to defeat all the enemies. The Bible says, and the sun stood still, and the moon stayed until the nation took vengeance upon their enemies. So the sun stood still in the midst of the heavens and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. These boogers were tired. These warriors were tired, fella. I'm telling you, they were so tired by the time they got done. But I'm going to tell you something. Something affects our bodies that God made. It's called adrenaline. And there's something called fight or flight. And adrenaline kicks in when you're, number one, in danger, or you have to move fast. Adrenaline kicks in so that you can move at the fast pace to get out of the way of whatever is coming at you. I can imagine these guys after a while are saying, man, I'm going to tell you something. We're going to keep fighting with our swords. We're going to keep moving. We can do this. God's got this. God's given us the victory. And we're not going to quit till every single one is gone and dead. I'm sure their adrenaline kicked in. I'm sure they began to say, God, I see what's happening as they're fighting. And they maybe stop. Maybe just have a few seconds just to look up and they see that sun is still there. And they still got enough sunlight. Oh, here they come after me again. And they continue to fight to the point where they take them all out. Now, here's the ending. There was no day like it before or since, and the Lord heeded the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. Now, I know some of you are going to say, I don't know if I believe that. Okay, just because it's in the Bible. Oh, well, let me show you something. Cambridge researchers announced Monday that they pinpointed the date of the biblical account of Joshua stopping the sun, which they claim is the day of the oldest eclipse ever recorded. Now, the only problem with an eclipse, if they call that an eclipse, usually eclipse only lasts, unless it was different back then, lasts a few minutes, right? So there's some other arguments that I like. Others argue, this one I don't like, by the way, that the passage is poetic and doesn't to be taken literally. No, I take God's word literally. I believe that God is a God of miracles. In fact, if I had time, I would tell you about some miracles I have seen, literally. And I can tell you that God is a God of miracles. So, you know what? I got another one. Don Stewart writes this. Some have argued that evidence for this long day is found in other cultures. Okay? You know how cultures keep their writings and they write things down for posterity and history, just like we have? So here's some parallel accounts. There's indisputable evidence from the modern science of ethnology that such an event occurred as Joshua records. In the ancient Chinese writings, there's a legend of a long day. The Incas of Peru and the Aztecs of Mexico have a like record. Now listen to this. Herodotus, an ancient historian, recounts that while in Egypt, a priest showed him that their temple records, and that he read of a day which was twice the natural length of any day that had ever been recorded. Now, how many civilizations talked about that besides the Bible with Joshua and Israel? That makes me think that God can do just about anything, that God's got this. God's got this. And so I'm here to tell you today that as amazing as that miracle is, the best miracle in this day is God's life living in you. God through Jesus, through his Spirit, living inside of you. So if you don't know Jesus today, you need to give your life to him. You need to surrender your life to him, because I'm going to tell you something. Every single person that, well, pretty much everybody I know that loves Jesus has seen something really strange, miraculous happen. Something sometime in their life. That's because God is the God of miracles. And that's what I got for today. And I am going to tell you, I've got some really neat stuff I've been writing down, and I'm just starting to research it, of some other great events that happen in the Bible. And there's no way in the world any of those things could have happened except for God. For instance, God could not have stopped the sun if he wasn't God, if he hadn't created everything. And he did. So you remember that next time. And hey, I'm going to tell you something. I'll see you next time. If you really like these stories, please subscribe. And I'll see you next time for the next mysterious story from the Bible itself, when you got a minute.